So we're going to talk about the phosphorus cycle, phosphorus being an element, and it's important that you know the difference between phosphorus and phosphate, especially when answering a question, because you may lose marks if you use phosphorus instead of phosphate or vice versa. So this is the phosphorus cycle. So why do we need to know about the phosphorus cycle? Why was phosphorus or phosphate important? So first I want you to pause the video after I've asked the question. So what molecules, can you write them down quickly, what molecules that you know about contain phosphate and why they're important? So the following molecules you should know contain phosphate. So ATP, adenosine triphosphate, it's got 3 phosphates. So hydrolysis of that final phosphate, the hydrolysis, that bond for the terminal phosphate, releases a small manageable amount of energy that can be used in many things, such like active transport, activation of amino acids, etc. Phosphate is also a key component of a nucleotide, which is a monomer for nucleic acids, so it allows DNA and RNA to be a component of DNA and RNA. Phosphate is also important for the hydrophilic head of phospholipids, allowing a bilayer to form, allowing that water, a barrier to water-soluble molecules in a membrane. And also it's a component of NADP, which is a coenzyme responsible for carrying hydrogen ions and electrons, or hydrogen atoms, in photosynthesis. So phosphate itself is an ion. This hasn't come out quite how I wanted it. So it's PO4 3-, so phosphorus, 4 oxygens, and a 3- charge. So most phosphorus is in the form of phosphate ions in sedimentary rocks. And the process of weathering erosion brings fresh phosphate into the cycle, which is available for plants being absorbed by the roots. So here's a blank phosphorus cycle, and we're going to fill this in bit by bit as we go through. I'm going to ask questions, and if you wouldn't mind pausing and having a think about it, see if you can work out what the order are before I reveal it. So first of all, what process do you think is going to link this and here? So you've got a pool of phosphates in oceans, lakes and soil, so dissolved phosphates in water within the soil. So how do plants access that? So phosphates are absorbed by active transport using plant roots. So once in the plants, those phosphates can be assimilated by the plant, so the plant can produce its own ATP, its own DNA, NADP, etc. phospholipids. So how are these two going to link? So if you could just write that down and pause the video. I don't know why it's done this with the font, but anyway. So feeding and digestion. So an animal will eat the plants, like this tapir here. It will digest the plant material, digest those, so the DNA and the phospholipids, releasing phosphate, which then can be absorbed and then used by the animal to make its own phospholipids, etc. If you could then think how phosphates in animals could then return to oceans, lakes and the soil. So excretion such as urination can return phosphates, so urine contains phosphates, back into the oceans, lakes or soil, which is then available to plants. So that's a little cycle that you've got occurring there. Next I'd like you to try and link phosphates in animals to this box here. So that would be death and faeces. So faeces and dead organic matter will contain stores of phosphates in those biological molecules like phospholipids. Next I'd like you to try and link this box here with this circle here. So how do phosphates from here go back into oceans, lakes and the soil? Can you pause the video? So that would be sort of decomposition using saprobionts. That's similar, the same type of microorganisms that you'd find in the nitrogen cycle. So they release extracellular enzymes to digest the biological molecules that contain phosphates within the living, within the dead material, like this apple here, and then phosphates become soluble, and then they can enter oceans, lakes, or the soil, and again are then available for plants to absorb. And I've got another cycle which can continue here. Next, you may know how you can link this box with phosphate in rocks. So this is a process of sedimentation or deposition, and it can take millions of years for this to happen. And a very basic quick guide on here. It's unclear from the specification what level of information you would need for this. The name of the process would probably be okay. And the last thing I'd like you to do is try and link phosphates in rocks to phosphates in the soil, oceans or lakes. Again, if you could think about it and pause the video. So this can occur naturally, or we can sort of use rocks, the source of rocks in, the source of phosphates in rocks to make fertilizers. And so erosional use of fertilizers can link these two here, so adding more phosphates to the soil, for example. And this can go back again, you can have sedimentation going back. Then you have another circuit going through like this. At the minute, there is a concern at some point that the concentration of phosphates in the soils may become limiting and may sort of reduce the yield of crops and make it harder to grow enough food. As this replenishing the phosphates in rocks is a lot slower than what is being used. So here's two definitions for one of the last processes we talked about, is erosion, breaking down movement by processes such as water and wind, so it's breaking down the rock through movement processes. You've got weathering, which breaks down the rock due to exposure to environmental conditions, so like changes in temperature like hot and cold, that can break up bits of rock. It doesn't involve movement. So one example of fertilizer that can be used, so it's not got directly from rock, but this is guano from seabirds, seals or cave-dwelling bats. Excellent source of phosphate, high source of phosphate, also high source of nitrates as well. So a really good fertilizer to use. So it'll increase the yield of crops. Do beware that this can also, and any sort of fertilizer can lead to leaching and eutrophication, which is an environmental hazard, which you'll learn about in a different video.